What is a task? There are many definitions for this word, but all of them emphasize the importance of organizing a course around communicative tasks that learners need to engage in outside the classroom. According to Peter Skehan, a task is an activity in which meaning is primary. There is some communication problem to solve. There is some sort of relationship to comparable real-world activities. Task completion has some priority, and the assessment of the task is in terms of outcome. Let's talk about task-based instruction. What does it refer to? In task-based instruction, the priority is the functional purposes for which language must be used. Task-based instruction focuses on a whole set of real-world tasks instead of subject matter content. Input for tasks can come from a variety of authentic sources, such as speeches, conversations, narratives, public announcements, interviews, oral descriptions, games, photos, letters, poems, directions, invitations, textbooks, diaries, songs, telephone directions, menus, and so on.
Now let's talk about target task versus pedagogical task. Task-based instruction makes an important distinction between target task and pedagogical task. Target tasks are those which students must complete beyond the classroom. But don't worry, this does not mean homework. When we say beyond school, we refer to the use of the language in real situations, such as a job interview. Target task makes students to apply the functions of the language in determined context. For example, if one focus on the language is to share information, and we talk about share personal information, then we can apply the context of job interviews. Then the task will be to represent a job interview, to create a CV, etc. Here we have some examples of target tasks, such as a simulation of a visit to a doctor, a job interview, or writing a letter, which are common situations in real life that students might face beyond the school context. But then, what is a pedagogical task? Well, a pedagogical tasks are more focusing on the use of the class topic. The main characteristic of this type of task is that students need to focus on the use of the current class topic to complete the task. For example, if we are seeing the topic of illnesses vocabulary, then students must create a simulation of a visit to a doctor but applying the vocabulary. Or for example, in a job interview simulation, students must apply WH questions. As well as in the writing a letter example, students can practice formal and informal vocabulary, past tense, the parts of a letter, etc. Something that is important to note is that target task and pedagogical task are not completely opposites. You will often employ pedagogical tasks to produce target task. For example, the main task of a class will be to have a 4-minute conversation or to create a weather forecast. And we can apply several pedagogical tasks to complete these both target tasks. For example, the use of the future tense we are going to, which is applicable to the weather context, weather vocabulary, or even talk about numbers.
A task-based curriculum specifies what a learner needs to do with English language in terms of target tasks. It organizes a series of pedagogical tasks intended to reach those goals. A distinguishing feature of this curricula is their insistence of pedagogical soundness in the development and sequencing of tasks. To make a task-based curricula, the teacher needs to consider carefully the following dimensions of communicative tasks: the goal, input from the teacher, techniques, the role of the teacher, the role of the learner, evaluation, and that's it.
Task-based curricula differ from content-based, theme-based, and experimental instruction in that the course of the objectives. In this case, in this curriculum, the objectives are more centered on learner's primary language competence. So in this task base, we have a well-integrated approach to language teaching, and it helps us to organize our classroom around those practical tasks that language users engage in out there in the real world. Tasks and skills that the users are going to use in the real world.
The topic of our sample class is planning a trip. As part of the introduction, the teacher is going to ask a question to the students. What places have you visited on your vacations? The students are going to share their experiences with the class. In the second activity, the students are going to read a handout that the teacher is going to give to them in order to know some tips when planning a trip. In this activity, the students are going to practice the reading skill.
In the next activity, students are going to listen to an example of a plan for a trip, and in this stage, they are going to practice listening. Then the teacher asks students to think about a place they would like to visit in order to plan a trip to that place. And based on this example and the tips that they already read, they are going to write their own plan. And finally, to practice speaking, students are going to present their plans in front of the class.